This is what happens when you follow obsolete advice in a world that moved on without you. You work harder, earn more, and somehow end up with less at the end of every month. The old formula, school, job, save money, avoid debt, retire comfortably, isn't broken because people stopped trying. It's broken because the rules changed in 1971 when money became debt. And most people are still playing by 1950s rules in today's economy. The gap isn't between the smart and the dumb. It's between those who updated their mental software and those still running on expired programming. And here's the uncomfortable part. Your financial struggles might have less to do with the economy and more to do with the fact that you're operating with a mindset that expired decades ago. Some basic arithmetic will make you uncomfortable. Your doctor friend finally hits $1 million in income and he's thrilled, tells everyone. Then the tax bill comes and it's $750,000. Net take home after expenses, maybe $400,000. Not bad, objectively. But here's the problem. He worked 80-hour weeks, traded his entire life for that income, and the government took 75% before he could touch it. Now look at the other side. Someone builds a business, makes $1 million as an entrepreneur, immediately invests it in real estate with a 4, one step up from the bank, and 1 million becomes 4 million in assets, pays nearly zero in taxes because of how depreciation and debt structures work. The math isn't even close. Same $1 million, but wildly different outcomes. Not because of effort, but because of understanding which side of the tax code you're standing on. Here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Debt and taxes make the rich richer, while debt and taxes make the poor and middle class poorer. That's not a moral judgment, that's arithmetic. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed, and you're just playing on the wrong side of it. Warren Buffett had a partner for nearly 60 years, and that partner once said something that caused an uproar. The first $100,000 is but you got to do it. I don't care what you have to do. If it means walking everywhere and not eating anything that wasn't purchased with a coupon, find a way to get your hands on $100,000. After that, you can ease off the gas a little bit. People hated this, called it out of touch, privilege, tone deaf. But here's what he understood that most people don't. Compounding doesn't care about your feelings. And the first $100,000 is exponentially harder than the second $100,000 because you're fighting against zero momentum. You're pushing a boulder uphill with no leverage. He also said this, the first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. Translation, once you get momentum, the worst thing you can do is stop. Most people stop constantly. They save $10,000 and spend it on a car. They build momentum, then interrupt it for lifestyle inflation, and the compounding never gets off the ground. This same person lived in the same modest home for over 70 years, despite being a billionaire. He wasn't cheap. He just understood that the scoreboard doesn't care about your house. Wealth is what you don't see. The person driving the $80,000 car is usually the one borrowing to maintain an image, while the person driving the 15-year-old sedan might be the one with $3 million in assets. Here's how to guarantee poverty, and it's easier than you think. First, spend more than you make. Always use credit cards, carry balances. Pay 18% interest on things that lose value the moment you buy them, and do this for decades. Buy the car you can afford because you deserve it. Finance the vacation on credit because you need a break. Upgrade your lifestyle every time you get a raise. And make sure your expenses always exceed your income. The math will destroy you, but slowly enough that you won't notice until it's too late. Second, become unreliable. Show up late, miss deadlines, make excuses, be the person no one can count on, and you'll crater immediately. If you're unreliable, it doesn't matter what your other virtues are because nobody will want to work with you, hire you, or partner with you. Reputation is built over years and destroyed in moments, and unreliability is the fastest way to destroy it. You'll wonder why opportunities never come your way, but the answer will be obvious to everyone except you. Third, never learn anything new after age 25. Whatever you learned in school, coast on that forever. Assume the world won't change. It will, and you'll be obsolete. The information you learned in college is already outdated by the time you graduate. And if you stop learning, you'll watch younger, hungrier people pass you by because they kept growing while you stood still. You'll complain that the world changed on you, but the world doesn't care about your comfort. Fourth, marry the wrong person. Choose someone who drags you down, encourages your worst habits, and resents your ambition. Then watch your life collapse. Pick a partner who spends recklessly while you're trying to save, who mocks your goals while you're trying to build something, who wants you to stay small because your growth makes them uncomfortable. A bad marriage will cost you more than money. It'll cost you energy, focus, and years of your life you'll never get back. Fifth, envy everyone. Spend your energy resenting people who are doing better than you instead of learning from them, and this guarantees misery. Compare yourself constantly to others. Feel bitter when they succeed. Assume they got lucky or cheated while you got screwed, and let that poison eat away at you. Envy is the stupidest of the 7 deadly sins because it's the only one you can't even enjoy. You're just miserable while learning nothing. Sixth, never take responsibility. Blame the economy, your boss, your parents, the government, anyone but yourself, and remain powerless forever. Make yourself the victim of every circumstance. Convince yourself that external forces control your life and surrender all agency. The moment you decide nothing is your fault, you also decide nothing is in your control, and you guarantee you'll never improve your situation. Seventh, develop self-pity as a core personality trait. Whenever something goes wrong, retreat into feeling sorry for yourself. Throw yourself a pity party and stay there. Wallow in how unfair life is, how hard you have it, how nobody understands your struggle. Self-pity is a disastrous mode of thought because it keeps you focused on the problem instead of the solution. And while you're busy feeling bad for yourself, the world moves on without you. Now invert it. Do the opposite of those 7 things, and you're already ahead of 90% of people. It's not complicated. Avoiding stupidity is easier than seeking brilliance. Most people fail not because they lack intelligence, but because they do obviously stupid things consistently. They know they shouldn't carry credit card debt at 18%, but they do it anyway. They know they should save, but they don't. They know they should learn new skills, but they coast. They know their partner's dragging them down, but they stay. They know envy and self-pity are poison, but they indulge anyway. The formula for failure is right in front of you. Just do the opposite. Here's what nobody tells you about paychecks. The moment you take one, you're thinking like an employee. And employee thinking is the most expensive mindset you'll ever adopt. An employee thinks, how do I KEP this job? While an entrepreneur thinks, how do I create value people will pay for? An employee thinks, I need security, while an entrepreneur thinks, I need competence. An employee thinks, what if I fail and can't pay my bills? While an entrepreneur thinks, what if I succeed and never have to ask permission again? The difference is in courage, it's mental models. Most people have 3 people inside them: a poor person who wants immediate gratification, a middle-class person who wants security and a steady paycheck, and a rich person who wants freedom and control. All 3 are there, but only one gets trained. You're taught from age 5 to get good grades so you can get a good job, so you can get a good paycheck, so you can retire at 65 and hope you have enough. That's the entire program. The paycheck becomes the goal, not freedom, not options, not leverage, just the paycheck. And here's the trap. Once you optimize your life around the paycheck, you become a slave to it. Can't take risks, can't build anything, can't leave. Golden handcuffs. You make $150,000 a year, but you've structured your entire life, mortgage, car payments, private school, lifestyle around that $150,000, and now you're trapped. The entrepreneur doesn't need the paycheck. If the business folds, they start another one. If the government doesn't like them, they move. They're not asking for permission or security. They're betting on themselves. That's the real difference, not the business, the mindset. There's an idea that floats around in motivational circles. Believe in yourself. You can do anything. Follow your passion. It's garbage. Here's the reality. You can't do anything. You have specific aptitudes. And if you play games where other people have the aptitudes and you don't, you're going to lose. That's as close to certain as any prediction you can make. A 5'7" guy with average coordination isn't going to make the NBA no matter how much he believes in himself. Someone with no mathematical intuition isn't going to become a great physicist by sheer willpower. Someone with no natural gift for language isn't going to write the great American novel just because they're passionate about it. This isn't pessimism, it's reality. And operating in reality is the first requirement for success. The smart move isn't to follow your passion. The smart move is to figure out what you're actually good at, your circle of competence, and operate inside it, then expand it slowly over time. Your circle of competence is the set of things you genuinely understand at a deep level, not things you read about in an article or heard on a podcast, but things you could explain to a skeptical expert and have them nod in agreement. Most people's circle of competence is smaller than they think, and that's fine. The problem comes when they operate outside it and don't even realize they're doing it. Warren Buffett and his partner built one of the most successful investment records in history by doing something radical. They only invested in things they understood. If they didn't understand the business model, they didn't invest. No exceptions. They passed on the internet boom in the late 90s because they didn't understand it. And everyone mocked them. The financial press called them dinosaurs, old men who didn't get the new economy, relics who would be left behind by the digital revolution. Then it crashed, and they looked like geniuses. They weren't geniuses. They just stayed inside their circle of competence. They understood insurance. They understood consumer brands. They understood banks and railroads and businesses with predictable cash flows. They didn't understand how internet companies with no profits and no clear path to profitability were worth billions of dollars. So they didn't invest. When your friends and neighbors were getting rich on paper, buying .com stocks, Buffett and his partner sat on the sidelines and took the criticism. When the bubble burst and trillions of dollars evaporated, they still had their capital and could buy great businesses at reasonable prices. Most people do the opposite. They hear about crypto, AI stocks, NFTs, whatever's hot, and they invest in things they fundamentally don't understand. Then they lose money and blame the market. They can't explain the underlying technology. They don't understand the business model. They have no idea how these things generate value, but they jump in anyway because everyone else is getting rich and they don't want to miss out. The market didn't fail them. They failed themselves by operating outside their circle of competence. Here's a simple test. If you can't explain to a skeptical 12-year-old how something makes money, you don't understand it well enough to invest in it. If your explanation involves buzzwords like blockchain technology or disrupting the space or network effects, but you can't actually describe the mechanism by which cash flows from customers to owners, you're gambling, not investing. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Intense interest in a subject is indispensable if you're really going to excel. You can force yourself to be fairly good at a lot of things, but you can't be really good at anything where you don't have intense interest. Think about the best person you know at anything, best carpenter, best teacher, best programmer, best salesperson. They didn't become the best by forcing themselves to care. They became the best because they were genuinely fascinated by the work. They read about it in their spare time. They think about problems even when they're not getting paid. They get excited talking about details that bore everyone else. You can't fake that level of interest, and you can't sustain excellence without it. So stop trying to be passionate about things you don't care about. Stop following advice to just hustle harder in areas where you have no natural advantage. Stop forcing yourself into careers or businesses or investments because someone told you that's where the money is. If you're not genuinely interested, you're competing against people who are, and they're going to destroy you because they're running on natural fuel while you're running on willpower, and willpower runs out. Find the thing you're genuinely interested in, get better at it than most people, and operate there. That's the actual formula. Know your circle of competence. Stay inside it and expand it gradually by learning adjacent skills. Jump into areas you don't understand just because they're hot. Don't confuse a temporary interest sparked by potential profits with genuine fascination. And definitely don't believe the motivational speakers who tell you that you can do anything if you just believe hard enough, because that's how people end up broke and bitter, wondering why passion and positive thinking weren't enough. There are 3 ways smart men go broke: liquor, ladies, and leverage. The first 2 are just added because they start with the same letter. It's really the third one. Leverage, borrowed money, debt, and it's killed more smart people than anything else. But here's where it gets interesting. The same people who warn you about leverage use it themselves. Why? Because there's a difference between reckless leverage and strategic leverage, and most people can't tell the difference. Reckless leverage, borrowing money to buy things that lose value, cars, boats, consumer goods, or borrowing on credit cards at 18% to maintain a lifestyle you can't afford. This is suicide. Strategic leverage, borrowing at 2.5% to acquire cash flowing assets that appreciate and generate income, like real estate with positive cash flow, or businesses with predictable revenue situations where the math is overwhelmingly in your favor. Most people are told avoid all debt, and that's kindergarten advice. The real advice is avoid bad debt, learn to use good debt. But that requires understanding the difference, which requires financial education, which most people never get. Here's the part that'll make you uncomfortable. When central banks print trillions of dollars, savers get crushed. If you're holding cash, you're losing purchasing power every day. If you're in debt at a low fixed rate and own appreciating assets, you're winning. The system is literally transferring wealth from savers to debtors. You don't have to like it, but you do have to understand it. The old advice, save money, avoid debt, work hard, worked when money was backed by gold. In 1971, that ended and money became debt. The rules changed. Most people didn't update their strategy. There's no such thing as a bad economy. There's just your economy versus the external economy. You have an external economy, the job market, interest rates, government policy, things you can't control. And you have an internal economy, your skills, your mindset, your network, your ability to create value, things you can control. Poor people with a poor internal economy only see a bad external economy. They look around and see problems, obstacles, unfairness. And they're not wrong because those things exist, but they're powerless because they've anchored their success to external factors. Middle-class people with a middle-class internal economy want a nice house, a steady job, a car, and predictable security. When you take the job away, it's a disaster because their entire identity and financial structure collapses. Entrepreneurs with a strong internal economy see the same extra. Now world. Recessions, layoffs, uncertainty, and shrug. No job to lose, no boss to fire them. If one business fails, they start another. Their locus of control is internal. This is the real gap, not rich versus poor, but internal focus versus external focus. People with a weak internal mindset are terrified of what might happen. So it generally does happen. People afraid of losing their jobs usually lose their jobs because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. People with a strong internal mindset fall down and think, good, now I'll get back up stronger. The first job of an entrepreneur isn't to control the economy. It's to control what's inside their head, and everything else flows from that. Most people stop at first order thinking, if I save money, I'll be safe. If I avoid debt, I'll be secure. If I get a high-paying job, I'll be rich. Second order thinking asks, and then what? You save money in a savings account at 0.5% interest while inflation runs at 4%, which means you're losing 3.5% of purchasing power per year. Congratulations, you're getting poorer safely. You avoid all debt, including the mortgage at 3% that you could have used to buy a rental property, cash flowing at 8%, which means you saved yourself from risk and cost yourself hundreds of thousands in opportunity. You get a high-paying job as a specialist doctor making $500,000 a year, which sounds amazing until you realize you're working 80 hours a week, have no time freedom, pay 40 to 50% in taxes, and if you stop working, the income stops immediately. You traded your entire life for a paycheck you can't keep. Second-order thinking is uncomfortable because it exposes hidden costs. The safe choice often isn't safe at all, while the risky choice often isn't risky when you actually run the math. Here's an example. Someone refinances $300 million in debt from 5% to 2.5%, which sounds insane because $300 million in debt? But do the math. At 5%, that's $15 million a year in interest. At 2.5%, it's $7.5 million. They just put $7.5 million a year back in their pocket by lowering their cost of money. And meanwhile, the assets that debt is secured against are generating income and appreciating. The debt is making them richer. Most people hear $300 million in debt and panic. Second-order thinkers hear $7.5 million in annual savings and understand. Here's what it comes down to. There are old ideas and there are new realities. When you operate with old ideas in a new reality, you get crushed. The old idea, go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, avoid debt, buy a house, invest in index funds, retire at 65%. The new reality, money is debt, inflation is permanent, taxes punish earners and reward owners. Saving cash loses value. Job security doesn't exist. The rules changed 50 years ago. You can be angry about this. You can call it unfair. You can wish it were different. None of that changes the scoreboard. Or you can update your strategy. Learn how tax law actually works. Understand the difference between good debt and bad debt. Build skills that create value independent of a paycheck. Operate inside your circle of competence. Avoid stupidity more than you seek brilliance. And never interrupt compounding unnecessarily. Spend each day trying to be a little wiser than you were when you woke up. Step by step, you get ahead. Not necessarily in fast spurts, but you build discipline by preparing for fast spurts. Slug it out 1 inch at a time, day by day. The safest way to get what you want is to deserve what you want. Deliver to the world what you would want if you were on the other end. Be reliable. Be competent. Keep learning and avoid the catastrophically stupid mistakes that sink most people. If you're unreliable, it doesn't matter what your other virtues are because say you'll crater immediately. If you're envious and resentful, you'll be miserable no matter how much money you have. If you stop learning at 30, you'll be obsolete by 40. This isn't motivational fluff. This is arithmetic and psychology. The people winning in this economy aren't smarter than you. They're just playing by updated rules while you're still using the 1970s playbook. Someone will always be getting richer faster than you. And that's not a tragedy. That's irrelevant. The only question that matters is whether you're getting wiser, more competent, and more valuable year by year. The first $100,000 is brutal and takes everything you have. After that, compounding does the heavy lifting, but you have to get there first, and most people never do because they interrupt the process over and over again for things that don't matter. Avoid sloth, avoid unreliability, avoid envy, avoid self-pity, avoid entitlement, avoid all the mental habits of self-deed. You know what they are because you've watched them destroy people you know. Do the opposite of those things consistently for 20 years and you'll be in a different universe from where you started. Not because you got lucky, but because you avoided being stupid. The 99% aren't doing that. They're following obsolete advice, making the same mistakes, and wondering why nothing changes. You don't have to join them. Understanding both the power of compound interest and the difficulty of getting it is the heart and soul of understanding a lot of things. Most people never get it because they never start. They're waiting for perfect conditions, perfect knowledge, perfect timing. Here's the secret. It's never perfect. You start anyway. You learn as you go. You make mistakes, but you don't make the catastrophically stupid ones. You build slowly, compound consistently, and 20 years later, people think you got lucky. You didn't get luck. Why? You just played a longer game with better rules than everyone else. That's the formula. It's not sexy, it's not quick, but it works.